Actually, I want to take a question back up to 50,000 feet. And that is, one area that's never discussed, or that I don't hear discussed, is personal responsibility. With 60% of the American people overweight or obese, with a great rise in diabetes and other areas that could be treated if we took better care of ourselves, why doesn't any of this legislation help people become more responsible for their own well-being?
First of all, I want to say that Congressman may not have the congressional insurance, but I think he hasn't done anything about making sure the rest of the Congress doesn't have it either. So I just wanted to say that. And the important thing is that personal responsibility and how much of you can you really regulate or legislate is a very difficult thing. I think one of the great aspects of the Affordable Health Care Act is that you can invest in preventive health care, where mammograms and pap smears and colonoscopy and cancer screening, that is going to cut down the cost of health care. I think it's important.
Congressman Lyons, and then we're going to finish up.
Yes, first of all, let me say that Upendra is in great shape, and certainly I admire the fact that those of us who are in good shape, as he is.
I'm a hard-working man, Congressman. I keep myself, because I can't afford to have my wife's health insurance.
We together pay for our health insurance, and I am hardworking as well, and I congratulate the Assemblyman. He's just had a birthday, and congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, we need greater personal responsibility in this society, and certainly my political views in general are based upon greater personal responsibility in so many areas, and this is one of those areas. I commend the First Lady, Mrs. Obama, for her stressing a better quality of a diet, particularly for young people, and I hope we can discuss the issue further.
Okay, great. So moving on to the second topic, which is tax policy. Mr. Lance, the House of Representatives is responsible for the nation's tax system. Everyone pays the amount that Congress has set forth for them, be that me, you, Mitt Romney, or anybody in this room. So Congress is responsible for the fact that nearly half of the households in the country, infamous 47%, pay no income tax. Has Congress gone too far in trying to cut taxes, or is it time to return to a broader tax base?
Thank you. Regarding the American people desperately want to work. We are a very hard-working society, and it may be true that 46 or 47% of the American people currently do not pay the federal income tax, but many of those people pay payroll taxes, Social Security tax, and Medicare tax. And I clearly want to be on record as saying that I hope to continue to work on behalf of all of the American people, 100% of the American people. I don't favor raising taxes on anybody. And we're going to have a debate on that issue in the session of Congress that will convene after the election in the middle of November, extending into December. Whether or not taxes should be raised on some Americans or on all Americans, I don't favor raising taxes on any Americans. The marginal tax rate of 35% is, in my judgment, quite high enough. If we were to raise taxes on some Americans, this would be particularly harmful to New Jersey. New Jersey residents pay the second highest tax burden in the nation. Sometimes it's first. It usually goes back between Connecticut and New Jersey. And in this congressional district, this is one of the congressional districts that would be hurt the hardest if taxes were raised. What I do favor is extending all of the current tax rates, at least for another year, and then next year the Ways and Means Committee, the Committee of Jurisdiction for these matters, will, I hope, engage in fundamental tax reform, both at the individual level and at the corporate level. And Dean Jim Hughes at Rutgers University's Blaustein School has said that high earners in the Garden State will see their tax burden increase disproportionately compared to the rest of the country if taxes are increased on a portion of the American people. at the end of December. Let me be clear, I don't favor raising taxes on anybody. I would imagine the compromise that would be reached, I hope the compromise that would be reached is to extend all current tax rates for 1 year, and then next year to have systemic tax reform, broadening the base, perhaps lowering rates, but certainly broadening the base. That can be done, and that would mean that some deductions might not continue to exist for high-income earners.
Thank you. Mr. Chivukula, I actually have a two-part question for you.
Do I have to say something about that? No.
Well, first you got to answer my question. Then you can talk about whatever you want. So I have a two-part question. A key plank in the Democratic platform is for the wealthy to pay their fair share of taxes. In fact, fair share is probably the most used phrase in this year's campaign. Can you define what fair share means? How much should the top 1% pay?
Well, I think the tax code has to be changed. I think when you look at Warren Buffett, who is a billionaire, and his tax rate is at 17%, and his secretary's tax rate is 31%. There's something wrong with the system. I think they need to bring about some tax parity, tax rate parity. That is very much needed. And
but
I do not believe that raising taxes will get us out of the problems. I think we need to figure out, I know Congressman Lance is talking about reducing some deductions, and I haven't seen any specifics on that. But I think we need to go back to the drawing board, look at the overall tax system. We have to simplify the tax code, and we need to see how we can balance the budget. I mean, we have a tremendous deficit that we need to address, and also we need to look at how we can, especially the District 7, they pay one of the highest alternate minimum taxes. So we need to figure out how to do that, and also look at the long-term capital gains. There, a whole bunch of things have to be looked at.
But specifically, can you tell me what share of the total taxes collected you think the top 1% should pay?
I think fair share.
And what is the fair share? I'm sorry, because this
I understand
that, but I don't know what it means.
Well, I think that's where you need to look at all the things when Congressman Lance talks about eliminating some deductions. What are the deductions? We don't know. I think that's what we need to work together in a bipartisan manner, try to see how we can protect all levels, income levels. We need to make sure there's some tax parity.
So the second part of my question, by the way, just for clarification, the top 1% pays 40% of the total taxes collected. The top 10% pays 90% of the total income taxes collected. So it isn't a fair share, but by definition. But anyway, the second part of the question is that the 7th Congressional District is one of the wealthiest congressional districts in the country. And so if the tax burden on the top 1% is raised, it will hit the 7th Congressional District very hard. Right. Are you in favor of that?
No, I'm not in favor. I think I wanted to make sure that we extend the Bush-era tax cuts, not just for 1 year like Congressman Lance talks about. I think we need to solve this problem. We can't be punting year by year. I think that creates uncertainty in the economy. A small business person wants to invest. They don't know what the tax coming up next year and beyond. I think so we need to look at that. I think because of the cost of living in the state, $250,000 is not enough. I think you have to go up to $1 million.
So, Mr. Lance, you already alluded to this, but at the end of the year, the Bush-Obama tax cuts are expiring. In addition, there are a number of other taxes that are going to be increased, and government spending is slated to be cut dramatically. If we go over a fiscal cliff because of these cuts, the economy could very well go back into deep recession. So what is Congress going to do between now and the end of the year to fix this?
I certainly do not favor going over the fiscal cliff for reasons you have suggested. I think it would lead to a continuation of the recession, and we're trying to get out of the recession. Technically, we're not in a recession at the moment, but we certainly do not have strong economic progress. And I believe we would go back into recession, or perhaps even a depression, God forbid, if we were to go over the fiscal cliff. I favor extending all of the Bush tax cuts permanently. My suggestion is the compromise that will be reached is to extend them for 1 year. And regarding the other taxes that may increase, I think we should look at that situation as well. The other half of this is sequestration of funds, and I am firmly of the belief in a bipartisan capacity that we should not engage in sequestration. The House of Representatives has already passed legislation in this regard as it relates to our responsibilities to preserve the nation's defense, and I would urge the Senate to act on that as quickly as possible. I am confident that men and women working together in goodwill can avoid the fiscal cliff, and I certainly will work to the greatest extent possible in that regard. And I would hope that that will be true regardless of who is elected president in 4 weeks.
Mr. Chivukula, same question. You've already answered part of it about extending the Bush-Obama tax cuts.
I think, you know, we are already on the cliff. The question is, are we going to fall off the cliff? I think that's, I won't be able to do anything about it because that's going to trigger in on January 1st. And Congressman Leonard Lance has the opportunity to fix that before January 1st. But I think the key here is that when you talk about taxation, you know, we don't want, you know, Congressman Leonard Lance voted for the Paul Ryan budget, which really taxing the senior citizens who are living on fixed incomes and cutting their Medicare and turning it into voucher care, and trying to cut some of the program that disadvantageously address women's health care issues. I think these are some of the things you need to look at when you talk about fairness.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next area, which is the debt and deficit. Mr. Chivukula, I will start with you this time. The United States debt is somewhere in the range of $16 trillion, a little bit north of that. Is this a problem? And if so, why? And how immediate is the problem?
Well, you know, to address the issue of debt, you have to look at the our GDP. You know, it's $15.2 trillion, and the growth rate is about 2.8%. And if you look at countries like China and other countries, they're growing at 8% beyond. So we need to think about, look at the Simpson-Bowles Commission report and trying to invest in the economy. You have to grow the economy. You cannot come out of this thing by cutting your way out of it. And we have to address the issue of debt. We have to have fiscal restraint. We don't want to make sure that eliminate some of the programs that are not working and reduce the regulatory burden on the businesses, small businesses as well as large businesses. Try to attract investment. There is $2 trillion sitting outside the United States. We can, through some tax policies, we can bring that investment here, create the jobs here so that our economy grows much higher than 2.8%. I think that's critical, and so far I haven't seen anything. This Congress is one of the least productive in over 100 years. They haven't really, you know, this is the first time this entire year they had only 5-day work week, and you know, take long vacation before the elections for 6 weeks vacation, and then you're looking at they didn't pass the farm bill. Farmers are really affected because of the drought situation. They have not really done anything with the farm bill, and worried about you know, what's going to happen to the crops and the cost of produce in this state and elsewhere. I think it's very important that we address it, but you cannot just look at it just in a silo. You need to look at the overall picture, and that requires, you know, bipartisanship, and I'd love to see Congressman Leonard Lance showing more bipartisanship. I haven't seen anything. He's been lined up with the Tea Party, and he's just Paul Ryan embraced him, endorsed him, and then you have Eric Cantor coming to the district, and it is all Tea Party. So I don't know why, you know, where is this bipartisanship has been for the last 4 years. The Leonard Lance, I know from the legislature, he would not recognize Congressman Lance, who's standing next to him.
Mr. Lance, the same question. $16 trillion debt, is it a problem? How big of a problem, and how immediate of a problem?
Yes, it is the sword of Damocles hanging over not only this generation, but future generations, and I see young people in the audience. I have devoted my public policy responsibilities regarding issues of debt and deficits, first at the state level and more recently in Washington, and this is the issue that really concerns me the most. As a percentage of gross domestic product, our annual deficits at the federal level are the highest they've been since the end of World War II. The $16 trillion debt is increasing, and it's increasing at the rate of about $1 trillion a year. The President said when he was running for office 4 years ago that he would have the annual deficit by the end of his first term. That simply has not happened, ladies and gentlemen, and it is greatly disturbing. The best way to have lower annual deficits is to have a more vibrant economy. That is the best way to increase revenues into federal coffers without raising taxes. And if we could have an unemployment rate of 5 or 6%, then that would do a great deal in lowering annual deficits. And I am committed, based upon not raising taxes, particularly on small business men and women, to help the private sector create the jobs that America so desperately needs, so that we can make sure as many Americans who want to work are able to work, and as a result they will be paying taxes, and that 53 or 54% who currently pay the personal income tax will increase to 60% or 65%, and that will help us enormously. I do favor a glide path back to a balanced budget, but I'm under no illusion that it can occur overnight. It will take some time. And regarding my bipartisanship, I was criticized in the Republican primary for voting for the compromise last year that continues to fund the government. I believe the government has certain essential responsibilities, and I am proud to have cast that vote as part of a bipartisan majority. And of course, that legislation was signed by President Obama into law. My public policy in Trenton was on this issue. I sued Governor McGreevey, who borrowed inappropriately the general operating portions of the state budget without voter approval. The Assemblyman voted for all of that terrible McGreevey borrowing. I was the leading voice of fiscal responsibility in Trenton on that issue. And then later, my constitutional amendment at the state level, the Lance Amendment, prohibits further state borrowing without voter approval. This is the issue that has animated my public service, first in Trenton and more recently in Washington.
Mr. Lance, a follow-up question. The deficit, which feeds the debt, is driven in large part by military and entitlement spending. I'd like to focus first on the military. The United States spends more on defense than the combined spending of the next 10 countries, including China and Russia. Is this excessive?
I do believe that as we discuss ways to return to fiscal responsibility, all aspects of federal spending have to be on the table, and that includes defense spending. And we are now out of Iraq in a combat capacity, and we're likely to come out of Afghanistan probably by the end of 2013, and that, I hope, will reduce spending for the Pentagon. And I think that the Pentagon's budget should be on the table, as well as other aspects of spending. Regarding the Pentagon, I voted against funding a plane. This was favored by Speaker Boehner. It would have brought jobs to Ohio, particularly to Western Ohio, but I did not think that that expenditure was necessary, and I voted against the Speaker of the House of Representatives, John Boehner. I always try to vote my conscience. Regarding the entitlement issues, and I hope we can have a further discussion about that, also we need to make sure that Social Security and Medicare are protected, not only for this generation, but for the next generation as well, and I certainly have ideas regarding that.
Well, actually, that's where we are going to go right now with Mr. Chivukula.
I just want to think one of the things Congressman Lance talks about creating jobs, and he had the opportunity to vote for the American Jobs Act, under President Obama's leadership, and he has not voted for that. And how he hasn't proposed any legislation to see how jobs can be created.
We actually have a segment a little bit later on employment, but right now I'd like to stay with the...
Also, I think I just want to rebut what he said about McGreevey budgets. We were handed, coming out of Governor DeFrancesco, before the lame duck, they had actually increased a lot of the budget, and we had to pay for that, and we had to come up with ways to see how we can balance it. The idea is to try to pay the funding, school funding, try to see how we can provide benefits to people, and that's what I voted for. I think we have to protect the working families.
So on entitlements, the biggest driver of the deficit is entitlement spending. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are all growing at a tremendous rate, and as our baby boom generation is beginning to retire, the costs are exploding. No economist will tell you that the present system is sustainable, but you have called for it to be sustained. How can this be done?
Well, I think you got to go back to the actuarial studies when they estimated the life expectancy of people, and because of the advances in medical technologies, the life expectancy has increased. So we need to go back to the drawing board and try to see how we can come up with the actual actuarial numbers that will come up with how to sustain or how to sustain the social benefits. And the challenge is that you cannot just take a chainsaw and cut it. You need to figure out, you need to come up with surgical cuts. When you're cutting, you need to have everything on the table and try to see how we can have a balanced approach to cutting, so that way you do not put one segment of the population against another segment and cause undue hardship.
Mr. Lance, you said you had some ideas on how to sustain entitlements?
Yes, let me say that I am a strong supporter of Social Security, of Medicare, and of Medicaid, and these are programs that should continue not only for the current generation, but for future generations as well. When Social Security was enacted in 1935, the life expectancy in this country was dramatically less than it is today. When Medicare was enacted a generation later in 1965, the life expectancy had increased, but it was certainly not as great as it is today. I personally am in an age cohort where my retirement age for Social Security is not 65, it's 66. And for those a little younger than I, it is 67. I understand my time is up, but I would like to discuss this issue further.
Okay, well, we can, if you're both in agreement, we can take another couple minutes and continue to discuss entitlements.
And if I might continue, what I have suggested regarding Social Security is that those who are in their 20s might have to wait a year or two more to receive their full Social Security benefits. Now, I hope that's not misinterpreted by anybody in the room as cutting Social Security. I'm talking about young people in their 20s. I was informed a generation and a half ago by President Reagan, a strong Republican, and by Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill, a strong Democrat, that my retirement age for full Social Security benefits would be 66, not 65. I was given more than a generation's advanced notice. I respectfully suggest that we might look at a retirement age of 68 or 69 for people in their 20s. And I do not want this to be misrepresented as in any way cutting Social Security benefits for those currently on Social Security or anywhere near Social Security retirement age. Regarding Medicare, on our current path, the path of President Obama, full benefits will not be given to those currently in retirement beginning in 2013. It will be about 87% of full benefits beginning roughly 10 years from now. And that is simply unacceptable. Those who currently rely on Medicare and those who are about to enter the Medicare system or approaching the age of 65, they should be confident that they will receive full benefits, and I want to work in a bipartisan capacity to make sure that that occurs.
It's quite interesting that Congressman Lance voted for the Paul Ryan budget, which affects people who are 45 to 56, and it kicks in the year 2023, and it is going to affect them quite a bit. The amount of money they're going to be paying is $59,000 by 2023. Things like that you need to look at, and he says that he's for 20 years, people who are 20 years today, and he voted for a budget that starts affecting people who are between the ages of 45 and 56. I think it's very important to have consistency and make sure that there's some kind of certainty in this whole thing.
On that, let me say that the Paul Ryan budget this year permits all Americans to continue in the current Medicare system. There is an option for premium support, but the Paul Ryan budget this year permits all Americans, whether they're in their 20s or 30s or whatever their age, to continue in the Medicare system as it currently exists. And that was a compromise that was reached with Senator Ron Wyden, the Democratic United States Senator from Oregon. And I want to give Senator Wyden, a prominent Democrat, the credit he deserves in working with Paul Ryan on this issue. And this will not be the end result, but this was a proposal put forth by Paul Ryan and Ron Wyden. They are working in a bipartisan capacity to try to address the issue so that in 2023, current retirees on Medicare do not see their benefits reduced.
So I told you 10 minutes would not be enough to discuss any of these topics.